1. For some background information, I live in a small apartment complex right outside my campus with some friends. I'm also a 20-year-old girl. So all my friends were always bashing on me for never meeting up with any boys or going out. I had gotten sick of it. I didn't want to be the little friend who stayed home and ate pizza while my friends were out on dates with boys, so I signed up for Plenty of Fish. Now, I'm not the type of person who would say yes to any random stranger. They had to be nice looking, they had to have plenty of photos of themselves, and we both had to have at least 2 common interests. So with those rules in my head, I psyched myself up to join the world of online dating. Within a few days, I already had 2 boys I was talking to. One said he was a doctor, kind of hard to believe because he was 20. And one said he worked as a construction guy, easier to believe. I didn't like that the doctor guy was lying to me. But one day, as I was getting crap from my roommates, the construction guy, who we can call Dan, messaged me on a messaging app we were using and asked if I wanted to go out for a bite to eat. I told my roommates where I was going and who I was with, all the things someone should do, so someone knows if you've been abducted. I even had a check-in time so that when my roommate texted me if things were good, I had to say some silly code word that meant things were good. If I responded another code word, it meant help get me out of this. And if I didn't use code words, she would then call the police for help. So I quickly dolled myself up and got ready for my date. I put my hair up in a classy bun, leaving strips of it hanging down around my glasses. I put on a nice white blouse and some black pants, and I was ready to go. I jumped in my car and headed out to the restaurant where Dan had chosen. It was just out of my town, but it was still only a 15-minute drive from my apartment. I arrived at the restaurant and saw him almost immediately. He was wearing nice clothes and looked just like his photos. He was waiting just outside the restaurant doors for me. His eyes lit up when he saw me. He walked over to me and smiled. We chatted a little bit outside, since it was summer and not cold, and then walked inside. We ate dinner and talked about our life and things like how school was going. I got the text from my friend, but since everything was all good, I sent that code word back. Dan talked about how much he liked his job and things, and altogether it was pretty nice. Except for one thing. Dan was boring. He didn't do anything exciting or talk enthusiastic about anything, and it was boring. It was an average date, and I honestly didn't care to go on any more. The next day I woke up to the feeling of my phone vibrating non-stop. I looked at it and realized it was vibrating so much it had fallen off my dresser. I almost laughed. Then saw all the messages were from Dan. At first, they were all saying how much fun we had, and that he would really like to go out again. But then the messages took a turn. They got violent and angry that I wasn't responding. It was 7 in the fricking morning. I was sleeping. I noped out of that situation. I texted him back and said I had been sleeping and that no, I was not going on any more dates with him. I was just about to block his profile on both sites when I got a final message. Watch your back. At first I was really creeped out, but when I thought that since I had him blocked and all my accounts were deleted, he could do nothing. Wrong. Later that day I saw a text from a random number telling me how pretty I looked in my blue PJs. I glanced outside just in time to see none other than Dan running down my road. How the hell did he get my number? I thought wearily. I blocked that number and continued what I was doing. Later that night I fell asleep pretty early and woke up to my phone text alert going crazy. It was from the number I had just blocked earlier that day. There were dozens of messages saying how I was going to get it. I quickly showed all my roommates the messages. They all told me I should go to the police, but since I was a stupid person, I didn't. I blocked the number again and went back to sleep, but once again I woke up to my phone buzzing. I didn't wait. I jumped in my car and drove all the way down to the police station. Once there, they told me that they couldn't do much to help me and just told me to block the number. I did. At least I had it on record. Nothing happened for a few days. The number stayed blocking my phone for a while, and then the pictures started. There were pictures of my house, of me in my house, my car, my work. I went back to the police and finally I was able to get a restraining order against Dan. I never received any messages from Dan again after that. I now never use dating websites, so Dan, let's hope we never meet again. If anyone has any tips on staying safer, please let me know. 2. This happened roughly 6 years ago, in 2010. I would have been about 26 years old at the time. I live in a town in the mountains of southern Appalachia. If you aren't from this region, and that immediately brings to mind visions of poverty and dark hollers, well, they do exist, but the town I am from, and still reside in, is a university town with roughly 70,000 people. We have a number of public parks, but in recent years the most popular is one of the newest, which was built on the south side of town, and has a dog park in addition to a normal playground-type park for children, and numerous walking trails, some of which go through wooded areas. The path is lit at night, throughout most of the park, and although the gates close at sundown, it isn't uncommon for people to be walking their dogs late at night. I need to describe the layout of the park a little in order for the story to make sense. There is a large parking lot on one end. This is the main entrance of the park, and it is where the children's playground and the dog park are located, as well as the restrooms, etc. This lot is long rather than wide and stretches alongside a sidewalk that runs next to the playground. On the other end of the park, which is to say over some hills and through some lightly forested areas, there is a small pond and another smaller lot. This lot has a gate just like the bigger one, but it has a little area before the gate where it is common for people walking at night to park their cars. I had a friend back in those days who was an avid walker. She was a couple years older than I was, and although petite, was sort of fearless. She would often go walking at night by herself, and her apartment at the time was sort of out in the country, but only a mile or so from this park. So sometimes she would drive out there and walk by herself at night as well. I would say things sometimes like, "Oh, you should be more careful," because I'm a man who was raised in the South and we are perpetually worried about the females in our lives. She was fairly enlightened and would get angry when I would say things like this. None of this is to say I told you so. I'm just trying to paint a picture. Anyway, long story short, I started meeting her some evenings and walking with her, figuring a bearded 6'1" and 250 pounds man would be a deterrent to most creepers. So one night we were walking, and while there were usually a few other people in the park, it wasn't super late. It was just late fall and the nights were starting to come a little quicker. It seems like maybe it was around 8 PM, but like I said, it's been 6 years. Anyway, I had a rental car that week, luckily as it turned out, because of some work being done in my car. And I had parked it behind the gate on the wooded side of the park. As we came through the woods and rounded a hill towards the main entrance of the park, I sort of clocked a van in my peripheral vision that was pulling in the gate of the park, which for whatever reason had not yet been closed. The Parks and Rec employees in my town are sort of notorious for not being strict enforcers of the closed at sundown rule anyway. The weird thing about this was that it was sort of a cliché creeper van. It was an older model Chevy with no windows in the back, a sort of mottled rust and paint job, and dark tinted windows in the front. For a lot of you, depending on where you live, this might already be raising alarms, but in Tennessee, that is like every fifth car on the road. As we walked up the sidewalk parallel to the lot, the van turned behind us and then drove slowly past us on our left, coming almost to a stop, and then speeding up to circle around ahead of us at the other end of the lot. At this point, obviously, I was paying closer attention. Now the van came back toward us and the driver's side window was down. This would be the part where a lot of the naysayers will probably think I'm making this up, because the man staring at us from the van was about the closest thing to a cliché creep I could think of. He was large, bigger than me, with weird aviator-style glasses that may have been sunglasses, but were transparent enough that you could still see his eyes. He was wearing a hat and a camel-style coat, and he had a black mustache. He idled not 10 feet from us, just staring at us expressionless for a moment. We both sort of stopped, stiffened, and looked back at him. There was something about his gaze, some cold-hearted malevolence, the likes of which I haven't really ever felt in my life, which immediately chilled me to the bone. I have read articles about sociopaths and psychopaths where scientists theorize that the reason we feel uneasy in their presence is tied to an ancient biological response from the times when, truly, we were their prey and they were alpha protectors among human groups, tribes. I felt in that moment, I felt like I was out in the wild, naked on the tundra, and he was zeroing in on me. It was this feeling more than anything that elevated this moment for me, from merely dealing with a creep to something that was perhaps far more sinister. I grabbed my friend by the arm and said roughly, "Let's go." I started quickly across the field towards a series of hills and trees that were between us and the car, leaving the sidewalk behind. She was sort of shocked at first and followed quickly. We half walked, half ran a few hundred yards before realizing that the van had pulled out of the lot behind us and disappeared. My adrenaline was still pumping, and we had a quick conversation, basically consisting of, "What in God's name was that?" and "Let's get to the car and get out of here." We quickly moved through the woods and started back down the hill. As it descends toward the lot, there were a couple of wide, sweeping switchbacks and some trees and shrubs alongside. We crested the hill and could see the lot below, and what we saw there made my blood stop pumping for a moment. Behind my rental car, the Chevy van was parked, with his bright lights shining on the car and up the hill a little ways. We hid behind some foliage and watched as he switched his headlights on and off for a minute or two. Then he pulled back a bit and shined his brights further up the hill. He sat there for a long moment as we cursed the fact that we had left our cell phones in the car and tried to decide what to do. Of course, then he abruptly peeled out of the lot and took off down the road, which I did not mention before is a 2-lane country road with not much on it but cow fields and trees. We took off running down the hill toward the car, and we were just outside the ring of trees near the lot when he suddenly swung back in. Luckily, we were near cover and got behind a tree just up the hill from him. Again, he started shining his brights off and on into the trees. At this point, I was thinking I was going to have to attack him or something, to try and draw him away long enough for my friend to escape. Fear, adrenaline, and anger all converged in me like a dark river, and I was probably seconds away from bursting out from the tree and taking a run at him, when he once again peeled out of the lot as fast as he could. Well, you didn't have to tell us twice. We sprinted the remaining distance to the rental car and jumped in. I took off and went about 60 miles per hour down the road until we got to a neighborhood. I never saw the van on the road. In fact, I didn't see any cars until we got to a main road. I have no idea where he went, if he was sitting somewhere off the road waiting or what. We got back to her apartment, and my friend told me that, at long last, she would accept a can of mace if I wanted to give her one. We had a good laugh at that, but we were desperately shaken. We decompressed and talked it over for a while, and I agreed to contact the police the next day. I went down to the station and told an officer what happened. I never heard anything else about it. I have no idea what he wanted. We joked that we were 5 minutes away from being turned into lamps, but I really have no idea. Maybe he was just a pervert. Maybe he was a good old boy that just didn't like the idea of people in the park after dark. But that look he gave me when he was idling next to us makes me think we were pretty lucky to get away. Whatever his intentions were, I would surely be glad to never meet him again. 3. Since I saw some comments ask, I am a late 20s male around 6'4" and around 180 pounds. I am sometimes too nice to my friends. I tend to do favors for my friends even if they seem pretty ridiculous, as long as it's not terribly out of my way. Most of the time it's, "Help, I'm drunk and I need a ride home." Well, one night it's like 1:30 a.m. I get the call. A very, very drunk friend of mine, Claire, is begging me to come pick her up and give her a ride home soon. The bar is closing soon, and she is too drunk to drive home. The bar she is at isn't too far from my house, about a 10 to 15-minute drive, but the issue is that she lives like 35 to 45 minutes on the other side of town. Claire has been extremely nice to me in the past, and I did owe her a solid, so at about 10 to 2, I grab my keys and my concealed carry and leave the house. I get to the bar at around 2:05. She's sitting outside on a bench by the doorman. I pull into the parking lot, which was pretty empty since the bar is closed, and I assumed that the cars remaining were the workers who had yet to leave. I get out of the car and start walking to Claire, who is kinda slumped over. I was hoping she wasn't passed out drunk, and when I got to her, the doorman asked me if I was her ride. I told him yes, showed him my ID for proof, and what he said next was of some concern. He kind of pulls me in and says, I'll leave out where I interjected and just write what he said. Hey, I was supposed to leave when we closed, but I have a strong feeling your friend was roofied. She's been on the porch drinking all night and some guy kept hovering around her. I assumed it was a boyfriend or whatever, but she never turned to talk to the guy. She was either drinking or chatting with other girls around her. Well, anyways, she chugged her last drink, came up to me and told me you would be coming to pick her up, and asked me if she could sit by me. She told me she felt dizzy and sick. Told her sure, hoping she just drank too much, and she passed out right after she sat down. After that, I couldn't see that guy anymore, but I didn't want to take any chances. So visibly concerned, I thanked the guy profusely, and he even helps me carry Claire to my car. Midway through carrying her, she's kind of coming to. Like someone just waking up after a surgery. That really groggy, not knowing where you are, talking of nonsense kind of talking. I don't remember exactly what she was talking about, but I'm sure if I wasn't on high alert about her possibly being drugged, it was some funny shit. So we get her buckled in. I thank the guy again, and he just says he hopes she gets home safe. So now, hoping my friend is only stupid drunk and not drugged, I start driving to her house. The whole time I'm trying to keep an eye on her, and keep an eye on the road. She's now snoring asleep, which puts me at ease a bit. But about halfway to her house, my fuel light comes on. Cursing the fuel economy of a sports car, I pull into the next gas station. It's one of those small gas stations that doesn't have 24-hour store. So I'm on extra high alert when I start to pump gas. The gas station is about a block from the freeway, and right at the corner of the intersection. The street itself is pretty dark, with only lampposts shining very pitiful lights at large intervals. I get that really dead feeling, like this place is just abandoned. To give an idea of positioning, because this is important, the gas station is at the corner of the intersection. The storefront would be facing south, and we were right in front of it where the pumps were. The east would be where there are the air pumps for tires and parking spaces, and the north would be a diesel fuel pump, right behind the store accessible from the street, behind the gas station. I drive a Corvette, so the filler is on the rear end of the car, and I'm leaning against the rear looking around. To my left I hear this weird metallic scraping sound. I turn to see this guy about 15 to 20 feet from me come around the corner dragging a long metal pipe on the ground. I immediately sense that I'm in a possibly dangerous situation now. The guy looks almost possessed, but he's not looking at me, rather like he's trying to look into my car. I'm on the defensive but hope I can get him to leave, so I call out, "Hey, everything alright?" Without looking at me, he answers back, "You took my girlfriend from me. I'm here to take her back." Now he turns to look at me, and he's got blood in his eyes. Before he begins to take a step, though, I start yelling, hoping it'll get him to back off. I'm a little over 6 feet tall and not exactly skinny, but not exactly bulky either. But I have a really deep voice. Back the fuck off. Turn around and leave and no one has to get hurt. He takes a step towards me, clearly unimpressed, so almost automatically I pull my handgun from inside the waistband holster and draw a bead on him. "Back the fuck off, you don't have to die," I start yelling louder. Pretty sure my voice cracked because A, I'm scared shitless. No amount of self-defense classes and time at the range prepares you emotionally for this kind of situation. B, even though I carry, I'm really against violence and killing someone is not something I want to do. C, did I mention I'm fucking scared? Anyway, in a panic the fucker throws the pipe at me. It whizzes by, thankfully not towards the car but to my right. And I dive behind my car for cover. I have no idea if he has a gun himself or what, but I was going to put some kind of cover between me and him. And by the time I kneel up and aim over the rear of my car, he's booked it. I hear a car door slam and tires screech, and he launches off the curb on the east side of the lot and is tearing down the road, swaying all over the place. In my own panicked hurry, I pull the pump out of the car, screw the cap on, and tear out of there myself. Claire, however, is still passed out in my car, and now I'm afraid because I'm convinced she'd been drugged and we were followed by that guy. Me being more concerned about her earlier and keeping on the road, I must not have noticed being followed. The whole way back to her house, I'm wary of any car that's behind me. I'm also driving very aggressively, Reed speeding like a jackass, and when I get to Claire's neighborhood, I circle a separate block that's not hers 4 times, to make sure no one followed me. When I was satisfied, thinking I wasn't being followed anymore, I pulled up to her house and tried to shake her awake. She's doing that groggy waking up stuff from before. But now she's able to get up. I'm able to walk her, thankfully. I was worried that I was going to have to call an ambulance if she didn't wake up, and I get her keys from her bag. I manage to walk her inside, and at this point, she's kind of coming around, asking me what's going on, where she is, etc. I tell her she's home and get her to lie down. She's almost completely lost looking, and her eyes start welling up. She clings to me and starts sobbing. She's still very out of it, and I'm guessing she realizes something bad was going on, or attempted on her. I was able to get her to lie down and get her to sleep. I write a note for her which pretty much said, "Hey, I'll be in the next room. We're going to the hospital in the morning to get you checked out." Fast forward to the morning, she's sick as a dog, and after she expels some demons from her stomach, I drove her to the hospital where she got tested and treated. I still shudder to think what might have happened had I not had my CCW with me. I do know martial arts, but that's not something I want to take against a crazy person with a pipe. Claire still doesn't remember much from the night except calling me and wanting to sit next to the doorman. My advice for you guys on this sub, either be with friends you trust when you go out, or at least be vigilant if you're by yourself. That night could have ended badly 1,000 different ways, but thankfully, even luckily, everyone made it out safe. Edit. For anyone interested, I mentioned below about her hospital visit. They did a urine test and found traces of Rohypnol, roofies. In the days after, we went to the bar and let them know what happened. I gave as good a description I could of the guy. Claire decided against filing a police report, and I respectfully went with her wishes. Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 176. Thank you very much to everyone who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Okay, let's see where we are for the rest of the week. This should be the Wednesday this goes up. I'm not certain about a glitch video for tomorrow. If not, then we might have double paranormal this week. And I'm still working on a TIFU for Saturday. And with that, I'll have to love you and leave you for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.